While on vacation in London, a young woman named Aurora posed in front of Tower Bridge with her father, Richard, in hopes of capturing a lovely family moment. Later, when she took a closer look at the picture, she noticed something shocking that immediately set her into a state of panic. That single image would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Before we dive into this shocking story, please let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. The crisp morning air carried the scent of the river as Aurora, whose full name is Aurora Gibson in the original account, stepped into a day that would unravel a mystery beyond her wildest dreams. Strolling along Queen's Walk in South London at the age of 18, Aurora was experiencing the vibrant city for the first time, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the sights alongside her father, Richard. They had just finished their morning walk and were heading back to their Airbnb apartment on Bury Street. As Aurora's gaze swept across the sparkling river, a contented smile played on her lips. "Dad," she said, turning to Richard, "we should do more trips like this as a family. It's been amazing so far." Richard chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners, and replied teasingly, "Well, sweetheart, we've pretty much emptied out our holiday savings jar for this one. If you want to plan another trip next year, you might need to cut back on that online shopping habit of yours." Aurora laughed lightly and carefree, adding, "That sounds fair. I don't mind cutting down on shopping if it means we get to do this again with you and Mom." As they continued at a leisurely pace, the iconic Tower Bridge came into view with its majestic structure framed against the bright blue sky. Aurora's attention was suddenly drawn to a man standing nearby with a sleek photo booth, the kind she'd often seen at friends' weddings and events. Noticing their American accents, the man approached with a friendly smile and said, "Hello there. How about a lovely souvenir? My booth can print on magnetic surfaces instantly, and I'll throw in a digital copy too for only £9.99 for the both of you." Aurora's eyes lit up with excitement. "Oh, Dad, can we do it? It would be perfect to remember this day." Unable to resist his daughter's enthusiasm, Richard nodded and replied, "All right, let's do it." Together they posed, with Richard hugging Aurora from behind as they leaned against an iron railing near a lamppost. With Tower Bridge and the river as a picturesque backdrop, the photo booth came to life, quickly printing out the magnetic photo. Richard paid the man and accepted the print. However, as he looked at it, a flicker of surprise crossed his face. He quickly tucked the picture into his pocket and said, "Can I see it, Dad? Do we look good?" Aurora asked, reaching for her phone as the cameraman offered to send the digital copy. "Let's head back now, sweetheart," Richard said hurriedly. "We have a look at the apartment. Your mom is waiting, and we've been out since morning." As they made their way to the Airbnb, Aurora couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something about her father's reaction to the photo felt off. Did he not like it, or was he hesitant to spend more money on another shot? She chose to set those thoughts aside and focus on the excitement of exploring more of London with her parents. After all, if the photo turned out to be disappointing, they could always return later to take more pictures. After all, their apartment was just a 5-minute walk away. When they arrived at their temporary home, a cozy space that had become their sanctuary for the week, Caroline, Aurora's mother, greeted them warmly. "How was the morning walk?" Caroline asked, having just finished tidying up their luggage. "Did you bring me some breakfast?" Richard produced a paper bag with a fresh item inside, placing it on the table. Still buzzing with excitement from the photo session, Aurora flopped onto the couch and pulled out her phone. Caroline noticed her daughter's enthusiasm and turned to Richard with a questioning look. "What got her so excited?" she asked. "We took a picture together on Queen's Walk," Richard explained. There was a man with a portable photo booth that printed a magnetic copy from her spot on the couch. Playfully, Aurora called out, "Dad's being sneaky, keeping the magnetic copy for himself and leaving me with just the digital one." Richard retorted with a grin, "Hey, at least you have the digital copy to post on social media. You know me too well, Dad." Aurora replied as she continued to be engrossed in her phone, preparing to share their London adventure with her online friends. In the cozy Airbnb, the quiet energy of a family on vacation filled the space. Caroline savored her croissant, while Aurora carefully edited the photo for her social media post. Richard, ever the restless soul, glanced around the room with a slight frown and remarked, "You know, we've accumulated quite a bit of trash already. I think I'll take it down to the garbage chute and maybe get some fresh air while I'm at it." Caroline and Aurora nodded absently, both accustomed to Richard's need for the outdoors. Even back in the U.S., he was rarely content to stay indoors for long. As Richard gathered the trash and headed out, Aurora continued to work on her photo. Zooming in and adjusting the contrast and brightness, she suddenly noticed something in the background of their picture-perfect moment. A green trash bin stood out like a sore thumb. But it wasn't just the bin that drew her attention. Attached to it was a missing person flyer. Squinting at the small image, Aurora could make out the face of a little girl, with the words "still missing" boldly printed above the child's photo. A strange sense of familiarity washed over her as she stared at the girl's face, though she couldn't quite place why. Shaking off the odd feeling, Aurora finished her edits and uploaded the photo to her social media account. Just as she hit post, her mother's voice broke through her concentration. "Aurora, honey, let's go. I'm done with breakfast," Caroline called after finishing her meal. "You know how impatient your father gets when he's waiting." Quickly tucking her phone into her purse, Aurora joined her mother. They exited the apartment, expecting to find Richard waiting in the hallway or lobby. However, when they stepped outside, they realized he was nowhere to be seen. Surprisingly, neither Caroline nor Aurora felt particularly worried, as they were well acquainted with Richard's tendency to wander off and reappear without warning. He was never a quiet man after all. "He'll reach out when he's ready," Caroline said with a shrug as they began to walk along the riverbank. Retracing the path that Richard and Aurora had taken earlier, they eventually found themselves back at the spot where the photo had been taken. The cameraman was still busy with other customers, and near the trash bin stood Richard, to Aurora's surprise, as he was in the process of removing the missing person flyer from the bin. Curious, both Caroline and Aurora approached him. "Dear, what are you doing?" Caroline asked with a note of concern in her voice. "Those bins are full of germs." But it was Aurora who voiced the question that had immediately sprung to mind. "Dad, why are you taking down that poster?" Richard's head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, he seemed at a loss for words. Then a practiced smile spread across his face as he replied, "Oh, this? Some poor family must have put it up looking for their lost daughter. I didn't want you to see it and get upset. I know how sensitive you are about things like that." He chuckled nervously while folding the flyer and tucking it into his jacket pocket. It reminded me of those old news stories back in the States, the ones that always freaked you out as a kid. You used to have nightmares about kidnappings, remember? Aurora frowned, a nagging feeling of unease settling in her stomach. Richard's explanation seemed odd, almost rehearsed. Why would he remove the flyer instead of simply ignoring it? And how had he known about it before they did? As Caroline fussed over Richard by pouring sanitizer on his hands and suggesting they continue their exploration of London, Aurora pushed her doubts aside. It was silly to overthink her father's actions. She told herself he was probably just being his random, overprotective self. Yet, as they set off to discover more of the city, the image of the little girl's face lingered in Aurora's mind. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of London as the Gibson family continued their exploration. The city's vibrant energy pulsed around them, and any earlier suspicions in Aurora's mind subsided, replaced by the excitement of their adventure. Hours slipped by in a blur of sightseeing, each moment filled with laughter and wonder as they embraced the beauty of their surroundings. At one point, as Big Ben chimed at 1 p.m., Richard's stomach growled, and he checked his watch. With a familiar gesture that now seemed even more delicate than usual, he announced, "I'm getting hungry. Let's find a place to grab some food." As Richard and Caroline scanned the area, eyes darting from one quaint cafe to another, Aurora trailed behind, her attention fixed on her phone. The bright screen was a stark contrast to the muted tones of the historic city around her. Meanwhile, the notifications from her earlier post exploded with a constant stream of likes and comments demanding her attention. One particular comment from her best friend back home made her heart skip a beat. OMG, Aurora, that girl in the missing person flyer looks so much like you. It's like seeing your mini-me. Aurora's steps faltered, her mind racing as she reread the comment. Although the playful tone of her friend's words did little to quell the unease growing in the pit of her stomach, she found herself staring at the photo again, her eyes drawn to the blurry image of the flyer in the background. Richard's voice cut through her thoughts sharply and urgently. Is everything all right? What are you reading? Startled by the urgency in his tone, Aurora quickly locked her phone and slipped it back into her purse. Sorry, Dad. I just got distracted, she mumbled, reaching for the menu as they placed their orders with a cheerful waitress whose accent danced musically with the air. Yet, Aurora's mind kept drifting back to the missing person flyer. The nagging feeling of familiarity she had experienced earlier had only intensified after reading her friend's comment. The clinking of cutlery against plates and the low hum of conversation from nearby tables faded into the background as Aurora struggled with her thoughts. The warm breeze that ruffled the tablecloth, carrying the scent of freshly baked bread from the servers, did little to ease her growing unease. Dad, she suddenly said, her voice cutting through the comfortable silence of the table. Can I see that missing child flyer you took down earlier? The effect of her words was immediate and alarming. Richard's fork clattered against his plate with an unnaturally loud sound in the quiet corner of the restaurant. His face, which had been relaxed in the afternoon sun, tightened visibly as he repeated, I'm not sure I have it anymore, honey. It must have slipped out of my pocket or blown away in the wind. Aurora frowned, her gaze sharp as she studied her father's face. She was certain she had seen him tuck the flyer safely into his navy blue jacket, the same jacket that now hung on the back of his chair. But I saw you put it in your pocket, she insisted steadily despite the tremor of doubt in her voice. Richard's hand moved to his jacket, patting the pocket in a gesture that now seemed more performative than genuine. Sorry, darling, it's not there anymore, he added quickly, his words spilling out in a hurry. It's probably for the best. You'd just get upset if you saw it. Caroline, who had been silently watching the exchange with her fork suspended halfway to her mouth, finally spoke up. What's this about a flyer? I'm curious too. Her voice carried a hint of genuine confusion, mixed with concern. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of worry, that mirrored Richard's earlier unease. Richard waved his hand dismissively, the movement too broad and emphatic, and insisted, It's nothing really. We shouldn't ruin our holiday mood over a piece of paper. Yet Aurora couldn't shake the feeling that her father was hiding something from her. He had been avoiding any conversation about the flyer since that morning. The weight of unspoken words hung as heavily in the air as the aroma of their cooling meals. In an attempt to change the subject and pierce through the tension, Aurora asked, Do either of you have any of my childhood photos on your phones? What seemed like an innocent question caused Richard to tense visibly. His knuckles whitened as he gripped his napkin. His voice turned tight as he asked, Why do you ask? Aurora tried to keep her tone light and casual, even as her heart raced. Well, she began, idly tracing patterns on the condensation of her water glass. I posted that picture we took together on social media, and my friends keep saying how similar I look to that little girl in the flyer, like I'm just the adult version of her. Richard replied firmly, his words clipped and sharp. That's nonsense. Your mother and I raised you. You don't look anything like that girl. The sharp tone in his voice took Aurora aback, yet she pressed on with a playful tone that now felt forced even to her own ears. Come on, Dad. You must have at least one of my childhood photos on your phone. Can I see it, please? Richard's expression tightened further, deep lines etching around his mouth and eyes. I'm afraid not, sweetheart, he said, softening his voice in a rehearsed manner. My phone memory was full, so I moved most of the files to our computer back home before the trip. I don't have any of your old pictures with me. Caroline nodded in agreement, her movement a beat too late to seem entirely natural. I don't have any on my phone either, dear. Disappointment washed over Aurora, mingling with a growing sense of doubt that gnawed at the edges of her consciousness. Why was her father making excuses and avoiding the topic of the missing flyer? Why did a simple request for a childhood photo seem to spark so many excuses? Glancing around the restaurant for a distraction from the discomfort, Aurora's gaze landed on a figure across the street in Potter's Fields Park, a determined woman, moving purposefully as she put up a flyer. It was the same missing girl flyer her father had taken down earlier. "Look," Aurora said, pointing toward the park, "there's someone putting up more of those flyers." Richard and Caroline turned to look. Their movements were almost synchronized in reluctance as they watched the woman work. Their faces paled, the color draining away as if they had seen a ghost. As the woman turned and revealed her face fully, Richard suddenly broke into a coughing fit, his body shaking with the force of it. Caroline sat frozen, eyes wide and unblinking, her fork suspended in midair. "Do you know her?" Aurora asked in a barely audible whisper, noticing their strange reactions. "You both look like you've seen a ghost." In unison, in voices overlapping too quickly to be entirely truthful, they answered no at that moment. Their food arrived. The cheerful waitress, oblivious to the tension crackling between the three, set down their plates. The aroma of freshly prepared food mingled with the scent of London's summer air. Yet Aurora found herself unable to focus on the meal. "Let's eat," Richard said. "I'm starving. If you want to take a picture, please do so now." Aurora stood up from her seat and positioned her phone above her meal, snapping a picture of her dish more out of habit than genuine interest. As she lowered her phone, she glanced back toward the park, but the mysterious woman had vanished, as if she had never been there. The family ate in uncomfortable silence, the clink of cutlery the only sound piercing the heavy quiet that had descended upon them. Mechanically lifting forkfuls of food, Aurora's mind raced with questions about the missing flyer, her parents' odd behavior, and the enigmatic woman in the park. All of it swirled together in a confusing maelstrom, as if there was some hidden meaning behind it all. When the last remnants of their meal were cleared away, the tension at the Gibson family table remained palpable, a stark reminder of unspoken words and hidden truths. Still unsettled by the strange atmosphere that had descended upon their outing, Aurora cleared her throat softly before asking, "Where should we go next?" Her voice sounded small and uncertain, even to her own ears. To her surprise, Richard suggested, with a weariness that seemed out of place, "Why don't we head back to the Airbnb?" Aurora couldn't hide her disbelief. "Really, Dad? You want to go back to the apartment?" she blurted out, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. It seemed entirely out of character for her usually adventurous father, who was typically the one pushing for more outdoor activities, always eager to explore and experience new things. Richard shrugged with a weary smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "All this food is making me sleepy," he offered, gesturing vaguely. "I'm not as young as I used to be, you know." His excuse rang hollow in Aurora's ears, but she nodded slowly, her mind racing to make sense of this latest oddity on a day filled with strange occurrences. After paying the bill, as they rose from the table, Aurora couldn't help but notice how her parents seemed to move with an urgency that belied Richard's claim of tiredness. They set off toward their Airbnb, a short 10-minute walk from the restaurant. The streets of London stretched before them like a tapestry of old and new, the city's rich history evident in every cobblestone and centuries-old building. Yet Aurora found herself unable to appreciate the sights around her. Her mind was too preoccupied with a growing list of unanswered questions. As they approached the apartment building, a familiar figure caught Aurora's attention, a woman from the park, now seen posting flyers just outside the building. Her heart leapt into her throat as she recognized the woman. The woman's movements were methodical, each flyer placed with care, her face a mask of determination tinged with deep, abiding sadness. Without thinking, Aurora approached her, drawn by an inexplicable pull. "I hope you find your missing girl, ma'am," she said softly, gently tapping the woman's shoulder. The woman turned, her eyes widening in confusion as they met Aurora's for a brief, suspended moment. Suddenly, hands landed on Aurora's shoulders, pulling her back. Richard and Caroline had appeared beside her, their movements almost frantic as they ushered her into the building. Aurora stumbled slightly, caught off guard by their urgency. "What are you doing?" Caroline hissed in a strained, low voice as they entered the lobby. "You can't just approach strangers like that." Aurora opened her mouth to protest. She had merely been expressing sympathy, but the words died on her lips as she caught sight of her parents' faces, raw with fear and unmistakable horror. They rode the elevator in silence, the soft ding of passing floors the only sound breaking the tense quiet as Aurora's mind whirled, trying to make sense of her parents' reaction. It was as if they were afraid of something or someone. Once inside their unit, an uncomfortable silence settled over the family. Richard and Caroline moved about the space with forced casualness, putting down their belongings and tidying up with deliberate, controlled movements. Richard shrugged off his jacket and draped it over the sofa before unbuttoning the collar of his shirt, saying in a tone that carried forced lightness, "Your mother and I are going to rest for a bit. Maybe we can continue our sightseeing later in an hour." Before Aurora could respond, Richard and Caroline had disappeared into the bedroom, the door closing behind them with a soft click that echoed in the sudden quiet of the apartment. Left alone in the living room, Aurora sank onto the couch, her mind racing. She unlocked her phone and scrolled through more comments on her post. The observations about her resemblance to the missing girl had only increased, each one sending a chill down her spine. She typed out a reply, trying to deflect attention with a joking emoticon. "You guys are missing the focus of the picture." Even as she hit send, she knew her light words were a poor mask for the turmoil inside her. Her eyes then fell on Richard's jacket, carelessly thrown over the arm of the sofa. It lay there, innocuous and unremarkable. Yet Aurora felt inexplicably drawn to it, as if it held the answers to all the questions swirling in her mind. Almost without realizing it, she reached for the jacket, her hands trembling slightly as they searched its pockets. Her breath caught in her throat when her fingers brushed against paper. The missing person flyer was still there, along with the magnetic photo print from that morning. Her heart pounded as she glanced toward the closed bedroom door, where she could hear the low murmur of voices. Knowing she had little time, she hurried to her own room, closing the door quietly behind her. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Aurora unfolded the flyer with trembling hands. The rough texture of the paper felt oddly significant against her fingers as she ran them over the printed image, taking in details she hadn't been able to see clearly in the low-resolution digital copy of her post. The little girl's face stared back at her, eyes wide and innocent, a smile frozen in time. But it was the small printed date that made her gasp audibly, 2005. The realization hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. Not only did the girl look strikingly similar to her, but she would be exactly Aurora's age now. Aurora thought that if only she could find a childhood picture, it might confirm and perhaps ease her troubled mind. Perhaps she was just overthinking the situation. Determined to find answers, Aurora opened her social media app again and navigated to her father's profile, scrolling through years of posts, each swipe revealing another layer of what she had always believed to be her life. Finally, she reached the oldest posts. There, staring back at her from the screen, was a photo of herself from a few years after the age of the missing girl. Her heart seemed to stop as she looked at it, really looked at it for the first time. The resemblance was undeniable, unmistakable. In that moment, as Aurora sat on her bed in a rented apartment in London, thousands of miles from the life she had always known, the foundations of her world began to crumble. Questions she had never considered now demanded answers. Why was there a picture of her here in London, so far from the U.S., and why had her parents been acting so suspiciously since that morning? Had they been hiding something she needed to know? With a determination born of desperation, Aurora snapped a close-up picture of the flyer with her phone. Her hand shook as she carefully folded the paper along the same creases it had before, then returned it to Richard's jacket pocket, arranging it exactly as she had found it. Each movement felt weighted with significance, as if she were handling not just a piece of paper, but a key to unlocking the truth of her existence. Standing before her parents' bedroom door, one hand resting on the handle and the other hovering, ready to knock, she craved answers. even if she suspected they would only provide more excuses or perhaps even incite their anger for disturbing their rest. Just as her knuckles hovered inches from the wood, she heard muffled voices coming from within. Her hand froze, and she leaned closer, pressing her ear against the cool door. The muffled voices grew clearer, each word striking her like a dagger and shattering the last remnants of the life she thought she knew. She heard her father's voice, tinged with panic, asking about the missing girl photo. The fear in his tone was a stark contrast to the confident, reassuring father she had always known. Then came her mother's reply, softer, yet no less devastating. Either we tell her now, or one day she'll find out on her own. She'll hate us. Richard's resignation spoke of a burden carried far too long, and his words, "We've loved her enough," carried a desperate edge. After a heavy pause laden with unspoken truths, Caroline's voice, heavy with the weight of a long-held secret, finally revealed, "We kidnapped her." Richard then added, "She would hate us if this holiday is a mistake, coming back here to London," as the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The shocking truth hit Aurora, her chest constricting as she realized she had been holding her breath. A wave of dizziness washed over her as the implications crashed over her like a tidal wave. In her shock, she stumbled, accidentally pushing against the door handle. The door creaked open, revealing Richard and Caroline, their faces masks of shock and horror as they realized Aurora had been listening. Time seemed to stand still as they stared at one another, the truth hanging in the air like a physical presence. Aurora's voice trembled as she whispered, "Mom, Dad." The words felt wrong on her tongue, a lie she had unknowingly been living for 18 years. Richard's face paled as if he had seen a ghost. Yet even in his panic, he tried to cover with another lie. "We weren't talking about you, sweetheart. It was about the neighbor's child," but Aurora had reached her breaking point. Hours of doubt and confusion, culminating in this day of half-truths and evasions, finally boiled over. "Stop lying to me," she cried, her voice cracking with emotion, tears spilling down her cheeks and tracing hot paths on her skin. "You've been lying all day, all hours. I'm not a kid anymore, and I'm not stupid. Just tell me the truth." Her outburst seemed to physically push Richard back. His shoulders sagged in defeat. "It was for your own good," he said weakly, his words hollow even to his own ears. "We can explain everything. You'd better listen." His voice hardened with anger and hurt as Aurora crossed her arms, trying desperately to hold herself together as her world fell apart around her. For the next hour, in halting, guilt-laden words, Richard and Caroline unraveled the tapestry of lies they had woven around Aurora's life. In the living room of the Airbnb, the truth spilled out in a torrent of words that seemed to physically fill the space between them. They told her about that fateful day in Hyde Park, London, when she was just 3 years old, how they had stalked her family for days, planning the perfect moment to snatch her away. Each word was a blow, chipping away at the foundation of Aurora's identity. Richard explained in a hollow voice, his eyes fixed on a point beyond Aurora. "Your real parents were chatting with another couple while you were playing near a small ice cream stand." Caroline, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, continued, "I pretended to trip and spill a drink near your parents. It was just enough of a distraction so I could walk up to you." Richard's gaze, finally meeting Aurora's, revealed the pain in his eyes, matching the ache in hers as he added, "I promised to take you for ice cream. You were such a good girl, so trusting that you didn't resist at all." They spoke of fake documents hastily arranged, of a flight to the United States, of changing your name from Sarah Wells to Aurora Gibson, and of building a life around a stolen child. Each revelation dismantled the life Aurora had known, piece by piece. As they talked, Aurora felt as if she were floating outside herself, watching the scene unfold from a distance. The apartment, which had felt cozy and familiar just hours ago, now seemed alien and threatening. The walls appeared to close in, and the air grew thick and oppressive. "You're crazy," Aurora whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "You're criminals." Richard reached out as if to touch her, but Aurora flinched away. Though the gesture was small, it spoke volumes, showing that the trust that had once existed between them had been irreparably shattered. "We love you," Richard pleaded, his hand falling limply to his side. "For 18 years, we've been a family. We cared for you, provided for you, and always believed you'd have a better life with us." Aurora was beyond consolation. The hurt and betrayal were too raw and overwhelming. "Just because we lived as a family for so long doesn't mean you're not child kidnappers," she spat, each word dripping with venom. "It doesn't mean you're really family." Caroline tried to interject in a quavering voice. "What do you mean, Aurora? We are family. We love each other. Family doesn't have to be blood relatives. There are so many kinds." But Aurora cut her off sharply and finally declared, "I loved you both, but now I don't want to be family with kidnappers who have been lying to me for 18 years. I'm going to the police station now, and I'm reporting you both." The color drained from Richard and Caroline's faces as the reality sank in. In a moment of panic, Richard stepped toward Aurora. "I'm afraid I can't let you go now," he said in a low, dangerous voice. Aurora backed away, her eyes wide with disbelief. Before her stood not the loving father she once knew, but a desperate, criminal figure, a man cornered and unpredictable. "You're out of your mind," she said, voice shaking. "You can't just keep me here. You'll go to jail for this." But as she turned to flee the apartment, Richard's hand shot out, grabbing her arm with bruising force. "Yes, I can," he growled, his face contorted with a mixture of desperation and misguided love. "Because I love you too much to let you ruin our family." In that moment, as Aurora struggled against the iron grip of the man she had called Dad for 18 years, she realized that the life she had known was truly over. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The truth, long buried and hidden, had finally come to light, and its revelation would set in motion a chain of events that would alter not only Aurora's life, but the lives of everyone involved in this tangled web of lies and stolen identity. The tension in the room was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Aurora's eyes darted between Richard and Caroline, searching desperately for any sign of the loving parents she thought she knew. Instead, all she saw were strangers, kidnappers who had stolen her life. With each passing second, with every labored breath, she cried out, "Let me go." Her voice, raw with emotion, echoed as she struggled against Richard's grip. "I'm not your prisoner. You can't do this." Richard's face, a mask of determination and fear, showed an intensity Aurora had never seen before as he insisted, "We need to sit down and discuss this. We love you, Aurora. We didn't treat you like a prisoner. We can't let you throw away all the good things we've built." His comforting words now rang hollow in her ears. "How could you claim to love me when everything has been built on a lie?" she demanded. The life they had created felt like a house of cards, and she could sense it collapsing around her. They insisted she wasn't their prisoner, yet even the most beautiful house they had built felt like a prison now, because they had taken her away from her real parents. Aurora's fear quickly turned to a white-hot rage that burned through her veins. She lashed out both physically and verbally. "I hate you," she screamed, tears streaming down her face and leaving hot trails on her cheeks. "You liars! Child kidnappers!" The force of her words seemed to snap something in Richard. His hand rose, and, before anyone could react, he slapped Aurora across the face with such force that her lips split and a trickle of blood ran down her chin. The sound of the slap echoed in the suddenly silent room, a physical manifestation of the violence inflicted upon her life. Aurora cried out in pain and shock, her hand flying to her stinging cheek as she tasted the metallic, warm blood on her tongue. Even Caroline gasped, frozen in horror at the unfolding scene. Taking advantage of Aurora's momentary stunned state, Richard roughly pulled her toward the bathroom. His movements were jerky and uncontrolled, and with a forceful shove he pushed her inside and quickly locked the door. Aurora stumbled, catching herself on the sink, the cold porcelain a stark contrast to the heat of her flushed skin. Spinning around, she pounded on the door with her fists, screaming, "Let me out!" Her voice was hoarse with tears and fear. and the small bathroom space seemed to close in on her, amplifying her panic. From the other side, Richard's voice emerged, a mixture of anger and desperation. "This is your fault, Aurora. We just want to talk to you and find a solution. We love you so much. Everything we did was for your own good. We gave you the best life we could, the best education, the best attention and time, but you've disappointed us and made us angry." These words, meant to justify their actions, only fueled Aurora's anger and fear. How could they claim that kidnapping her and lying to her for her entire life was for her own good? The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. Aurora slid down to the floor, her back against the door, sobbing as her world shattered around her. The cool tiles of the bathroom floor seeped through her clothes, chilling her to the bone, but she barely noticed as her mind whirled with confusion, fear, and betrayal. Outside, she could hear Caroline's muffled cries and Richard's agitated pacing. The sounds of their distress, which once might have concerned her, now only deepened her own anguish. These people, whom she had loved and trusted implicitly, were now her captors. "If you don't calm down," Richard called through the door, his voice alternating between threatening and pleading, "we'll keep you locked in there even for nights if we have to, until you come to your senses and apologize for calling us names." The threat hung heavy and oppressive in the air. Aurora felt a chill run down her spine at the thought of being trapped in that small space for nights on end. Although they were only in London for a week and would eventually have to let her out when they returned to the U.S., she feared there would be no escape from them. Yet amid her terror, a spark of defiance ignited within her. "You'll go to jail for this," she shouted back, her voice trembling but defiant. "You can't keep me here forever. This isn't home." As the reality of her situation sank in, Aurora's mind raced with thoughts of her real parents, the ones she had never known. The image of the woman she had seen putting up flyers in the park flashed through her mind. Could that have been her real mother? The thought brought a fresh wave of tears as she wondered what kind of life she might have had if she hadn't been stolen away, what experiences, what love, and what truth had been denied her. Meanwhile, Richard's panic escalated as Aurora could hear him pacing back and forth. His footsteps were heavy and erratic. She imagined him running his hands through his hair repeatedly, a gesture she had seen 1,000 times before, but now imbued with a sinister new meaning. Trapped in the bathroom, her world turned upside down, Aurora realized that her life would never be the same again. The future she had imagined, college plans, career aspirations, relationships, now seemed tainted, built on a foundation of lies. In the living room, Caroline stood frozen, silent tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched the man she had built a life with unravel before her eyes. The weight of their actions and years of deceit pressed down on everyone, filling the apartment with an almost tangible sense of dread and regret. Richard continued his frantic pacing, each step a testament to his growing panic, while Caroline's face remained a mask of anguish and indecision as her eyes darted occasionally to the locked bathroom door behind which Aurora was trapped. Suddenly, Caroline's resolve crumbled. Without a word, she rushed to the kitchen, her movements jerky and desperate. The abruptness of her action barely registered with Richard, who was too absorbed in his own panic to notice her absence. In the kitchen, Caroline's trembling hands found the handle of a heavy cast-iron pan. She hefted it, feeling its weight as her mind raced with the enormity of what she was about to do. The cool metal pressed against her palms, grounding her amid the whirlwind of thoughts. Clutching the pan tightly, Caroline stepped back into the living room where Richard, still muttering to himself, continued to pace. The sight of him, the man she had once loved, the father of the child they had stolen, filled her with a complex mixture of love, guilt, and resolve. Raising the pan, her heart pounded so loudly she was sure Richard must hear it. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching into eternity as she steeled herself. In one swift, decisive motion, she brought the pan down on the back of Richard's head. A sickening thud reverberated through the room, like a gunshot, as Richard crumpled to the floor, unconscious, his body hitting the ground with a dull thump that shook the very foundations of their life together. Caroline dropped the pan, her hands flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. The heavy cookware clattered to the floor, its sound impossibly loud in the sudden silence. For a moment, she stood frozen, staring at Richard's prone form as the reality of what she had done crashed over her in waves, each one threatening to drown her in guilt and fear. As if snapping out of a trance, Caroline rushed to the bathroom door, her hands shaking violently as she fumbled with the lock. After what felt like an eternity, she managed to open it. Aurora, startled by the sudden intrusion, scrambled to her feet and pressed herself against the far wall. Her face was pale, tear-stained, with a vivid bruise blooming on her cheek where Richard had struck her. "Aurora," Caroline sobbed, reaching out but not daring to touch her. The space between them seemed vast, filled with years of lies and a betrayal too deep for words. "I'm so sorry for everything. I love you, but you need to go to the police and report us. It's the only way out of this," Caroline pleaded. Aurora stared at her, eyes searching for understanding in Caroline's face. Slowly, hope mingled with confusion as Aurora asked in a hoarse voice, "Why are you helping me now?" Caroline's face crumpled with guilt and sorrow as she explained softly, "Because I know there were only two ways this could end. Either this, or your father would have hurt you or kept you locked up for the rest of your life. I love you too much to let that happen." Aurora's mind reeled at this sudden turn of events. Part of her wanted to lash out in anger, while another part, remembering the love and care she had once known, felt a confusing mix of gratitude and sorrow. With trembling determination, Caroline urged, "Go. The police will help. They'll contact the U.S. authorities and keep you safe, at least for a moment." Despite everything, the thought of turning and the people who had raised her, whom she had loved for 18 years, felt like the ultimate betrayal. The complexity of her emotions, love, hate, fear, gratitude, threatened to overwhelm her. Yet Caroline's words, spoken with raw honesty, broke through Aurora's paralysis. With a shaky nod, Aurora moved past Caroline, the familiar scent of Caroline's perfume once comforting now making her stomach churn with conflicting emotions. Aurora paused only long enough to gather the evidence, the flyers and the photo print, before rushing out of the apartment. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another. Outside, Aurora ran through the streets of London, her heart pounding and her mind racing. The city, which had seemed so exciting and full of possibility that morning, now felt alien and threatening. Every face she passed seemed like a potential threat, every corner a possible hiding place for the secrets that had defined her life. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew she had to find the truth about herself, about her past, and about the family she had never known. With each step, she was running not just away from the apartment and the life she had known, but toward a future that was terrifying in its uncertainty. The weight of the evidence in her hands, the flyers and the photo print, grew heavier with each step. These pieces of paper, so innocuous in appearance, held the key to unlocking her true identity. They were a bridge between the life she had lived and the one that had been stolen from her 18 years ago. As she ran, tears streamed down her face, and she made a silent promise to herself and to the little girl she had once been. She would uncover the whole truth, no matter how painful it might be, and she would reclaim her identity, her history, and her very self. Somehow, she vowed, she would find a way to build a new life from the ashes of the old. The streets of London stretched before her like a labyrinth of possibilities and dangers. She barely noticed the curious glances from passers-by as she rushed past, her tear-stained face and disheveled appearance a stark contrast to the bustling city around her. Some looked on with concern, others with curiosity, but Aurora was oblivious to it all. Her mind was focused on one goal, reaching the police station. After what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes, she finally spotted the distinctive blue lamp that marked a police station. The sight brought a fresh wave of emotions. relief mingled with fear and uncertainty. When she finally burst through the doors of the station, Aurora was breathless and trembling. The sudden transition from the noisy chaos of the street to the quiet, orderly interior of the station was jarring. The harsh fluorescent lights cast everything in a stark, unforgiving glow. The officers on duty looked up in surprise as she approached the desk, clutching the missing person flyer in her shaking hands. A young American girl with a bruised, tear-stained face, clutching a handful of papers and looking utterly lost, she gasped, "I need to report myself and my parents." Her voice quavered as she held out the flyer, her hand shaking so badly she could barely keep hold of it. "I'm this missing girl," she declared. The shock on the officers' faces quickly gave way to professional efficiency as they exchanged quick glances. Years of training kicked in as they assessed the situation. One of the officers, a kind-faced woman with graying hair, stepped forward and said gently, "Come with me, dear. Let's get you somewhere quiet where we can talk." They ushered Aurora into a private room with gentle but purposeful movements. The room was small and sparsely furnished, with a table, a few chairs, and a large mirror on one wall that Aurora suspected might be two-way. As she sank into a chair, the reality of what she was doing began to sink in. Over the next few hours, Aurora recounted the story that Richard had told her about the kidnapping in Hyde Park, the hasty flight to America, and the years of deception. The words poured out in a torrent, as if now that she had started, she couldn't stop. She handed over the flyers and the photo print, watching as the officers carefully bagged them as evidence. As she spoke, Aurora felt as though she were describing someone else's life. The events were too fantastical, too cruel to be real. And yet, with each word, the truth settled into her bones, reshaping her understanding of herself and the world around her. The officers listened attentively, their faces professional and unreadable as they asked gentle but persistent questions, teasing out details that Aurora hadn't even realized she knew. With each answer, she felt as if she were dismantling the life she had known piece by piece. "We'll need to collect your DNA," one officer explained kindly once Aurora had finished her story, "and we'll need to contact your real parents for testing as well. It usually takes a day or two for results, but given the circumstances, we'll expedite the process." Aurora nodded numbly, her mind struggling to process everything that was happening as she sat waiting for the DNA swab. She couldn't help but wonder about her real parents, what they were like, and whether they would want her back after all these years. The thought brought a fresh wave of anxiety. She had spent her whole life longing for a truth she didn't know was missing, and now that it was within reach, she found herself almost afraid of it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a commotion outside the room. The door opened, and Aurora's heart leapt when she recognized the woman who entered. The same woman she had seen posting flyers outside the apartment. The stranger's eyes widened in recognition. Her hand flew to her mouth as she whispered, "I knew it was you. I had a feeling when you spoke to me earlier." Tears welled in Aurora's eyes as the woman, her real mother, rushed forward and enveloped her in a tight embrace. The unfamiliar yet somehow right scent of her mother's perfume surrounded Aurora as she clung tightly to this stranger who was now undeniably her mother. Years of loss and longing poured out in racking sobs, and a man followed close behind, his face a mixture of shock and joy. After a moment of hesitant silence, he joined the embrace, his strong arms encircling both Aurora and her real mother. In that moment, as the police gently ushered them into a private room to talk through tears and broken sentences, Aurora's real parents introduced themselves as Nessa and Edric Wells. Though their names felt strange on her tongue, there was an undeniable rightness in them. "We lost you in Hyde Park," Nessa explained, her voice thick with emotion as she held Aurora's hand tightly, as if afraid she might disappear again if she let go. "You were just 3 years old. We were chatting with another couple, and by the time we realized you were gone," Edric picked up the story. "We never even got a chance to see their faces. They vanished with you so quickly." The pain in Edric's voice, roaring after all these years, made Aurora's heart ache as she listened to their account. Despite the heartache, a small part of her couldn't help but think of Richard and Caroline, the life she had known. The complexity of her emotions was overwhelming. Love for the parents who had raised her, mixed with anger at their betrayal, and longing for the parents she had never known, all tempered by the strangeness of their presence. Edric continued, his voice breaking. "We've been searching for you all these years. This was our last ad campaign. We spent our last bit of savings on these flyers. If we hadn't found you—" His voice trailed off into an unspoken what if, hanging heavily in the air. Aurora felt the weight of those years and the relentless hope that had driven her real parents to keep searching long after others might have given up. A police officer gently interjected, reminding them that while he believed their story, there were still legal procedures to follow. "We need to collect DNA from all of you," he explained apologetically but firmly. "It's only through DNA confirmation that we can officially process this case." Aurora nodded, understanding the necessity, though her heart was conflicted as she watched the forensic team take DNA samples from her and her real parents. In that moment, she felt as if she were straddling two worlds, the life she had known and the one she was just discovering. As they waited for the expedited results, Aurora studied Nessa and Edric's faces, searching for similarities, a tangible connection to her true identity. The love and hope in their eyes were unmistakable, yet a pang of guilt for the conflicting emotions swirling within her arose. She knew that whatever the DNA results revealed, her life would never be the same. The family she had known for 18 years was built on a lie, yet they had given her love, even if it was founded on deceit. Now, sitting across from the parents she had never known, Aurora realized that the road ahead would be long and complex. The police station hummed with quiet intensity under the harsh fluorescent lights as Aurora sat with Nessa and Edric Wells. The air was thick with tension and unspoken emotions, each person lost in their own thoughts while waiting for news. Aurora's gaze flitted between her newfound parents, still struggling to reconcile their familiar yet strange faces. Edric paced restlessly in the small room, pausing every few minutes as if to speak, then resuming his pacing as the minutes ticked by like hours. Aurora's thoughts wandered back to the apartment she had fled, wondering what had happened after she left. Was Richard still unconscious? Had Caroline called the police herself? The uncertainty gnawed at her continuously. A soft knock at the door startled them all. A police officer entered with a carefully neutral expression and announced in a low, measured voice, "We've received some preliminary results. They confirm a familial match between Miss Gibson, or rather, Miss Wells and Mr. and Mrs. Wells." The words hung in the air for a moment before their full impact registered. Nessa's grip on Aurora's hand tightened, and a small gasp escaped her lips. Edric abruptly stopped pacing and turned to face the officer with wide eyes. The officer continued cautiously, "There's been a development at the apartment where Miss Wells was staying. The individuals she identified as her kidnappers have been taken into custody." Aurora's heart skipped a beat as she repeated in a nearly inaudible whisper, "Taken into custody? You mean they've been arrested?" The officer nodded solemnly. "They're being processed now. Given the nature of the allegations and the international aspects of the case, it's a complex situation, but yes, they're under arrest." A maelstrom of emotions swept through Aurora. Relief, fear, anger, and an unexpected pang of concern for the only parents she had ever known. "Can I see them?" she asked, surprised by her own request. The officer hesitated, glancing between Aurora and the Wells, explaining, "It's not standard procedure, but given the unique circumstances, I'll see what I can do." After making the necessary arrangements, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Nessa and Edric exchanged worried glances, clearly unsure how to react to Aurora's request. Nessa began hesitantly, "Are you sure you want to see them after everything they've done?" Taking a deep breath to sort through the jumble of her thoughts, Aurora replied slowly, "I know it doesn't make sense, but for 18 years, they were my parents. I need to see them to understand." Edric moved closer, kneeling beside her chair. "We understand," he said softly, though the pain in his eyes betrayed his words. "This isn't easy for any of us, but we're here for you no matter what." The sincerity in his voice and the unconditional support from these virtual strangers, her true family, brought fresh tears to Aurora's eyes. She nodded, unable to speak through the lump in her throat. When the officer returned, he led them through a maze of corridors to a viewing area outside the booking room. Through a large window, Aurora could see the processing area where suspects were being photographed and fingerprinted. There, looking small and defeated, were Richard and Caroline. Aurora's breath caught in her throat as she watched them being processed. Richard's face was a mask of anguish, his eyes rimmed with red and unfocused, while Caroline seemed to be in a state of shock, her movements mechanical as she followed the officer's instructions. At that moment, as their eyes met Aurora's through the glass, time seemed to stretch, laden with unspoken words and a lifetime of complicated emotions. Caroline broke first, her composure crumbling as she began to cry. Aurora called out in a muffled voice through the glass, "I'm so sorry. We never meant for it to end like this." Richard nodded, tears filling his eyes as he whispered, "We love you. We always did. Everything we did was because we loved you too much." Aurora felt her own tears spill over, hot trails down her cheeks as she pressed her hand against the glass, a gesture somewhere between farewell and a plea for understanding. As Richard and Caroline were led away, disappearing from view, Aurora wondered if she could ever fully recover from this revelation. A part of her yearned to maintain some relationship with Caroline, who had ultimately saved her from captivity, but she wasn't sure if she could ever forgive Richard and Caroline for what they had done or live with herself if she did. For a brief moment, Aurora even considered leaving everyone behind and starting a new life, free from the complications of her past. Sensing her turmoil, Nessa and Edric gently reassured her, "It's okay, Aurora. We understand this isn't easy. Take all the time you need. Know that you're safe with us. We couldn't ask for more than seeing how you've grown into such a beautiful, strong woman." Grateful for their understanding, Aurora admitted softly, "It will take me some time. I don't even know how long our trip to London was supposed to be. A family holiday with Richard and Caroline. We've been saving for so long for this European trip, with so many plans for when we got back home. Seeing it all crumble in one day, it's not easy." Nessa and Edric exchanged a look of compassion. "Take as much time as you need," Edric said softly. "Even if you want to keep staying in the USA, that's okay with us. You don't have to move to London." Overwhelmed by their words, Aurora felt a rush of emotion. "I still love them," she confessed in a barely audible whisper. "Richard and Caroline. Even now, I love them, and I wish I could just hate them instead. I feel terrible for still caring about them." Nessa reassured her gently, "It's normal. It means you were happy that they cared for you." Aurora nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "There's still so much to process. I hope I can build a bond with you both over time. I'm glad the lies are finally over." Nessa reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph, handing it to Aurora. In the photo, a baby version of Aurora smiled at the camera. "You were born here in London," Nessa explained, her voice thick with emotion. "This is where your home is, and it will always be open to you if you ever decide to come." A warmth spread through Aurora's chest as she sincerely said, "Thank you," looking at both Nessa and Edric as they exchanged contact information and promises to stay in touch. Shortly afterward, a police officer gently interrupted the moment. "Miss Wells, we need to arrange for your stay here. Since you're 18, you don't need a legal guardian, but we should discuss your options." As they followed the officer to another room, Aurora reflected on how her family holiday had turned out just that morning. She had been a carefree American teenager on a family holiday, excited about capturing memories with a street photographer's camera. Now, she stood at the threshold of a new life, her identity in flux, caught between two sets of parents and two versions of herself. The weight of the truth was heavy, yet it also brought a sense of liberation. For the first time, Aurora felt she could see the world and herself clearly. The path ahead was uncertain and filled with challenges she could scarcely imagine, but it was also rich with possibilities. As she stepped into the room where her immediate future would be decided, she realized that while the life she had known had ended, a new one was just beginning. Despite the pain and confusion, a flicker of excitement stirred within her for what lay ahead. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great stories like this one. Share this video with your friends and family, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay tuned for our next video, and check out others you might have missed. See you next time.